All right, it is 6:03. I now call to order the Station Area Task Force meeting of August 21st, 2025 at 6:03. First order of business is roll call. Please, staff, please call the roll.
Please note that Member Mayer is not going to be in attendance tonight. In addition, Member Collins is participating remotely due to emergency circumstances. Member Garg.
Here.
Member Collins.
Present virtually.
Member Evans.
Present.
Member Scher.
Here.
Member Huff.
Here.
Member Huynh.
Here.
Member Lung.
Here.
Member Mayer. Member Ondrasek.
Here.
Member Plain.
Here.
Member Stockwell.
Here.
Thank you. Is there a motion to excuse Member Mayer from this meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. I have a motion on second Huynh. I think we need to take a roll call vote, right? Since Member Collins is remote.
Yes, please.
Okay. So those who are in favor say, well, when I come to you, say aye, and not say nay. Member Garg?
Aye.
Thank you. Member Collins?
Aye.
Member Evans?
Aye.
Member Scher?
Aye.
Member Hoff?
Aye.
Member Huynh?
Aye.
Member Ondrasek?
Aye.
Member Plain?
Aye.
Member Stockwell?
Aye.
And an aye for me, unanimous, one absence to excuse Member Mayer. Thank you, everyone. Next, we have the declaration of SATF procedures. Staff, please read the SATF meeting procedures into a record.
Meetings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. The chair of the SATF directs all activity during the meeting. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent meeting. Special procedures or time limits may be applied to any items as prescribed by the chair. Copies of the current agenda and any staff reports for each item on the agenda are available online on the Station Area Specific Plan website, as well as on the city clerk's website.
Thank you. Next item we have is the consent calendar. We'll now move to consent calendar.
The procedure for the consent calendar is as follows. Consent calendar items may be enacted or approved by one motion unless requested to be removed by anyone for discussion or explanation. Item 1A is Station Area Task Force meeting minutes of July 17th, 2025.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar, or is there any comments, questions, corrections that needs to be done on the minutes? And I will entertain a motion as well.
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar. I second.
Thank you. Motion Evans, second Huynh. Again, roll call. When I come to you, if you're in favor, say aye. If you're opposed, say no. Start with Member Garg.
Aye.
Member Collins.
Aye.
Member Evans.
Aye.
Member Scher.
Aye.
Member Hoff.
Aye.
Member Huynh.
Aye.
Member Ondrasek.
Aye.
Member Plain.
Aye.
Member Stockwell.
Aye.
An aye for me, unanimous, one
Wait,
absence.
I actually have a comment on that. I just realized there's an error in the consent, the agenda.
Please.
Yeah, it mentions member Hashimoto is present. I don't believe that it would be the case last month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that's a correction. Thank you. I think that should be accepted.
Do we need to
Do we need a revote
revote on with that correction?
with the correction?
Sorry.
Okay. And then is the second okay with the correction? Thank you. Okay, we'll revote with the correction. Member Garg?
There's another correction that we were added last month and our names are not there on the
July. Okay. Sorry. Can you speak into it? I don't think they heard you.
You want me to say that again?
Yes, please.
So there's a correction that Neetu Garg and Warren Shore are not there in the names. There are old commissioners who were there, old members, I mean to say.
So it sounds like we just needed to update the roll call for,
Yeah, the
Valid.
issue was you hadn't been sworn in at that time, so
Oh.
we couldn't put you into the system we use to make the minutes, essentially. But that'll be corrected for next month or this meeting since you've been sworn in.
Yeah, and I also, sorry, one more correction. I also noticed it has Vice Chair Sukrit also, and I believe he also was no longer a member last month. If I'm, yeah. And Jonathan Marinaro, I guess he's also on there, sorry. Basically, it's the previous, the makeup from the month before.
now you're making me like go through it again, just to make sure.
I think it was the same issue about adding and removing members.
Yeah. We'll get that corrected.
Yeah, I'll see if we can. Definitely member Hashimoto at the minimum.
Yeah. Okay, so with those corrections, are there any more?
I also point out similarly in some of the votes, it's also captured wrong. So all the voting is also reflecting the wrong members. Maybe we
Let's
should
just continue this item.
continue this item and
Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think we need a vote for that. We can just continue that for the corrections, right? Oh, and then we really don't need a motion. We'll just continue that item.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on from consent calendar. Let's move on to general business. So I'll send this over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Lung. We have one item tonight, and we're going to be getting presentations from VTA staff, as well as a secondary presentation from WRT. VTA has taken a look at the property they own within the station area plan, which is a portion of that parking lot that we've been talking a lot about, particularly the view sheds to the train depot. And so they have worked with a consultant and come up with some potential schemes to give you an idea, since it is VTA-owned property, of kind of their thought process behind it as we're developing the plan more. And then WRT's presentation will be a deeper dive into some of the development standards they are looking at, including into the specific plan.
Thank you and welcome.
Leslie, is there a comment before or after presentations? Was that, could you hear me?
Yes, so the item that you would like to present, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
We'll do that at the end.
Okay.
The last item on the agenda under announcements.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Cerezo, the Transit Oriented Communities Program Manager at VTA. And I want to thank you, the task force, specifically Chair Long, City of Santa Clara staff, for inviting us to share some early ideas about the VTA site, building upon the tremendous work and commitment that you all have made to focus on the station area plan, along with WRT and our city staff. And I'm joined by my colleagues here, Robert Swerk, who's in the room with me, from VTA's Land Use and Development Review team, and also Christina Nape, who is a virtual participant. She's from our VTA Transit-Oriented Development team, as well as our Site Lab team member, Hugo Erasuris. And we are just excited to be with you all, community champions who are volunteering during their very busy lives. And it means a lot that you're here to help shape this very critical neighborhood in Santa Clara. VTA is really proud to be a partner in this planning effort. We helped secure federal funding to support it. And we're here both as stakeholders and thought partners. And while many know VTA for buses and light rail, we also play a really key role in how Santa Clara County moves and grows through planning, building transit, and developing vibrant, walkable communities around it. So one of our big priorities is transit-oriented development, or TOD, which is mixed-use, mixed-income projects on VTA land near transit. And these aren't just buildings. They're part of a broader vision that we call transit-oriented communities, places where people can live, work, learn, shop, and play within 15 minutes of a transit station. And we know that this vision can only live up to its fullest potential when it's co-created with community. So our thinking that we want to present here tonight is grounded in VTA's board-adopted policies on transit-oriented communities, on land use and development review, as well as the Community Design and Transportation Manual, which is a manual of best practices in transportation and land use, and place-based studies, very specifically here, the Santa Clara BART Station Area Playbook. So as this plan moves forward, it opens the door to future investment and the possibility of transit-oriented development on our site. And we're excited to continue advancing. How are we with sound on this? Should we pause it for a bit or? Okay, great. So we're really excited to advance this conversation with you all today. And before we dive into some initial concepts, I'll hand it over to Robert Swerk, who's going to share some reflections on the June, July preferred concepts from earlier this summer. Rob.
Thank you, Melissa. And again, Rob Swerk, I'm a principal planner at VTA, and just really appreciate everyone's time this evening to hear some just initial thoughts and reactions from VTA staff. And I wanted to also emphasize, kind of building on Melissa's points, that we just really appreciate the collaboration and partnership that city staff and the task force has shown within this process. We know that, for instance, our BART program colleagues were here last month talking a little bit about the update on the BART extension and the station. And we are kind of almost building on that discussion a little bit to just share both a few observations on the overall design, the preferred concept that was shared in June and July. And then, as was mentioned, we'll be talking a little bit about specifically the parking lot, the Caltrain parking lot, and the VTA owned parcel there. So overall, we wanted to just say, this is exciting. It's clearly on the right track. We see lots of really good things in terms of the land use intensity, the mix of uses that are proposed here, including the idea, I think it was mentioned in the July meeting, of a recreation center or kind of more additional uses being introduced into the area. The transportation network, just the idea of, especially on the east or northeast side, the airport side of the tracks, of having more of a finer grain transportation network and more placemaking opportunities, just really, really good things. So kudos, and we know, city staff, WRT have been doing great work. We wanted to just point out that in looking at the plaza TOD parcel in and around where the current Caltrain station is, that what's shown in the June, July preferred concept is a great opportunity to actually provide enhanced passenger experience for the VTA riders that come through the station. It's the opportunity, you have quite a bit of transfer activity right now between bus lines and between bus, Caltrain, bus, ACE Capital Corridor, but we actually envision being able to bring in much more attractive and enhanced passenger amenities like shelters, improved lighting, and so forth to kind of wrap the edge of that plaza and station area, the parking lot area. So it's another opportunity to add in terms of value to the community. We wanted to also point out that the way VTA thinks about that, the transit kind of loop around the parking lot now and the buses that serve it, that we envision most of the buses that currently serve that serve the station now that come in, they would continue to. It's possible actually Route 60, which goes, as you probably know, over to the airport and actually eventually to Milpitas BART, down by Valley Fair, Santana Row. If there was an undercrossing or a crossing of the tracks, a roadway crossing, it might be actually possible to bring that around much more directly, which would be nice. We do envision keeping the 22 and 522, which are kind of our core trunk lines along El Camino Real, keeping them on El Camino when they go northbound, where they are now, rather than pulling off into the transit loop. The main thinking there is that even at Diridon Station, where there's a really enhanced station planned eventually with high-speed rail and so forth, we would stay on Santa Clara Street because we want to be able to serve that efficiently. That route goes all the way from Palo Alto to East San Jose, and people have lots of destinations there. So for the sake of efficiency, but we could envision, for instance, replacing the current shelter that's there kind of on El Camino at the edge of the Caltrain lot with a transparent, really enhanced transparent shelter so that it's not blocking at all the view shed of the historic station. I'll just quickly hit on that. We think the mixed use approach overall is excellent, and we saw some really encouraging diagrams in the concept about kind of showing active uses spread in a strategic way, kind of climbing from the university side over to the BART station side. So it looks great. We recognize that, some of the details of the circulation of modes around the plaza and the parking lot will probably need to be refined later on, especially thinking about the possibility of either an under or over crossing at Benton Brokaw. Last month, you spoke about with our BART program staff, spoke about the BART station design. We just encourage thinking about flexibility in crossings there, recognizing, it is a big constraint to be able to go up and over, for instance, the rail yard there. But we are certainly flexible in continuing the discussion about crossings. And finally, thinking about the balance of the TOD and plaza on the Caltrain parking lot, that's really intended now to be the focus of the remainder of today's discussion with VTA staff here. So I think at this point, I will turn it over we'll go from Site Lab.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm going to get the other presentation up and rolling in a moment.
In the meantime, I can introduce myself. This is Hugo Errázuriz. I'm an urban designer and design director with Scilab Urban Studio. I'm very happy to be here in this meeting and looking forward to get your comments and insights from this exciting project. Can we do this full screen or we just, oh, thank you.
There we are.
Perfect. So yeah, thanks Melissa and Rob for the intro. And this is a very exciting, like I said, moment in which we're starting to look a little bit more into details, the station plaza area right next to the historic station and the Caltrans parcel and transit plaza next to it. If you go to the next slide, please. So you know the site pretty well. In terms of existing conditions, we have that big parking lot with the historic station that is both visually clear and appreciated from the city side as well as the rail side. And we also have an existing well right in the middle of the parcel. Next slide. One of the interesting observations we made is that we understand that the sidelines and view corridors to a station are very important. But in this case, having an historic building that is like one story, that sits kind of like one block behind, as much as important as the view sheds towards the building is the approach to the building, if not even more important than that. The being 400 feet away or kind of like a city block away, the perception of the building tends to be like much smaller, but then the approach to the building is what needs to be celebrated, enhanced, providing a safe and comfortable environment that brings people and draws people into the station. Next slide. Right now, the current studies present the station plaza as a large area encompassing and surrounding the VTA lot and bringing sort of like creating that sort of like living room to the historic station. But we're thinking about the scale of this plaza and how could we potentially start rethinking the relationship between this potential development that comes into it in order to really celebrate, activate, and create a very unique, important, and comfortable space for the station itself as you connect also to the pedestrian overpass into the BART station on the other side. Because of the size, we started looking at certain references. If you go to the next slide, please. And we saw, interestingly, the Santa Clara Civic Center Park has the same size that the plaza as it is presented right now. And you can get a sense of the scale of this place. It is a large place. Then, yes, in this case, it is surrounded by big roads, and that contributes even more to the sense of like being hard to really occupy this place, being a little bit hard to use it and activate it, whether it is beautiful to look at or not. That's a different issue, but there's some sort of like issue of sizing that could be in a way sort of like enhanced and activated. If you go to the next slide, we're looking now at another precedent that it gets, slightly smaller, maybe 2/3 of the size, where we see a plaza that gets much more use. It is immediately adjacent to other buildings, to the museum, to a mixed-use components. The plaza itself creates a canvas or a stage for things to happen there, to attract people, allow movement, but allow also programs to coexist. In the next slide, we get even smaller at 1/3 of the size of the plaza that is drawn there in the orange outline for the Santa Clara Station Plaza versus the San Pedro Square and Peralta Adobe, where you can see that a much more intimate space that celebrates historic heritage building can create a very sort of like pleasant, active, exciting, exhilarating area that kind of like merges modern and historic in the same place, combining kind of like the far views to newer buildings, completely making them part of the scenic experience of the plaza. Next slide, please. So with this sort of like idea of reshaping and rethinking the size of the station plaza, but still providing a very active, exciting, safe, and comfortable space, we went into some initial ideas. Next slide. In this case, they kind of like, we are trying to present them into two scenarios. These scenarios, one of them that we call the Central Crossing, presents a plaza that it's smaller, allows for a larger development area, but yet it really provides a very clear connection from the corner of El Camino Real and Benton Street right through the site and into the station plaza. Whereas Franklin Corridor sets the development a little bit back and continues the sideline from Franklin Corridor into the plaza and towards the station. If we go in slightly more detail in the next slides, the idea was to keep the infrastructure as it is, look at the station plaza as a place where Franklin Street corridor defines a little bit one of the edges. El Camino Real defines the other edge, and we extend the potential for development there. That means we allow buildings to continue that sort of like facade along El Camino, and the building or the potential TOD parcel extends in size. Now, we are thinking of providing a special entry moment at the corner of El Camino Real and Benton Street through the site, which allow us also to incorporate the existing well within this structure and connecting back to the new station plaza that then takes you to the historic station, as well as the landing of the future pedestrian bridge that crosses the train tracks. The street remains the same. The elements are all there. It's the sizing that changes and the approach to the building massing that provides very active programs, for instance, along the first floors, activating the plaza's edge. If you create this sort of like more active place that takes you and invites you to the historic station. In terms of this potential massing, if you go to the next slide, we're thinking of this could start following the original current studies, taking and borrowing the heights from the surrounding development, bringing a smaller building towards El Camino, as I said, also continuing that vision of the, let's say, 6-story floors that provide a sort of like facade or frontage towards El Camino, and creating a plaza that continues the sidelines, provide clear and safer crossings, and gathers people in this sort of like living room in front of the historic station. In this case, the plaza, it's almost, I would say, half the size than the original one. Next slide.
Hugo, I'm sorry. What slide is that? You're not numbered. So I'd like to come back to that later.
This slide is number 11.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And next slide, the second idea we're entertaining right now is the Franklin Corridor scheme, as we're calling it. But in a way, this one consolidates the potential development TOD parcel on towards one side of the street, thinking of the massing also, again, kind of like stepping down towards the historic station to not really sort of like overshadow it, but sort of like steps back from it. Instead of continuing the facade along El Camino Real, the building set back a little bit along the sideline, continuing a straight line to invite people into sort of like a front garden that could allow for potentially relocate the well, or the well would have to, in this case, be removed. The plaza, again, aligns with the view corridor from Franklin Street, providing, again, a very clear connection from El Camino Real towards the historic station, activated by ground floor activities, cafes, F&B, etc. In terms of massing, in the next slide, same idea, continuing the heights that have been studied by the larger station area plan. The building sets back and steps down to create some sort of like a varied skyline, and stepping down of the massing, reduce bulk, and yet still measure that space, activate the edges, and create a safe and fun place to access the historic station. In this case, the plaza is also smaller than the previous one. The development has increased in size, but it also provides opportunities around the edges in respects to the existing infrastructure. One thing to point, the bus stops are there, even the ones in El Camino Real, and being incorporated along the lines to be part of the existing layout. So they're not being removed, they're being enhanced. This will, both of them in a way, will allow again for an increase of potential residents and employees to really sort of like activate the space, bring in activities, program and uses to the ground floor, create a space that is a scale, more human scale, more measured and yet activated, providing a safer environment with, you know, eyes on the park, activities, programs, people moving and staying in this place by providing a variety of programs. In the next slide, this is kind of like then a comparison where we have the June-July concept on the left-hand side and these other two studies, bringing and hoping that this will bring some sort of like discussion in terms that there are things that may be working well, there are things that may be or could be improved, there are things that we may be missing at this point, and we would be happy to hear about those to see how this could incorporate into the plan, how we could eventually develop and evolve this so that they really respond to the goals that you have set as a task force for this place. And that's all we have to share for now. If Melissa, Rob want to add something, otherwise open to comments and questions.
That's it. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to respond and have a dialogue with you all about these ideas.
Thank you for the presentation. Did have one comment about the signal tower not being considered on here, but I can leave that to everybody else to discuss. But if anybody have any comments and questions about this particular item, this would be the time.
But no, there you go.
Go, Vern, go.
Hi, I'm new here, so I may just be a little confused. So in one representation, it said VTA lot, but in the next one, in the same place was a building. Is that because the lot's underneath the building?
The lot. Yes, so Melissa, do you want to, or?
Could you go forward, please?
I'm sorry,
Go forward in the slides, please.
I'll go forward.
More. More, please. Yeah, so there it says VTA lot, right? But in the next one, there's a building there. So is the lot underneath the building?
Go ahead.
I could try and take this, and certainly my colleagues could add. I think maybe it's just the terminology that's a little bit unclear, that what we're pointing out there is, so currently of the entire Caltrain lot, VTA owns a portion. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it's actually like a percentage ownership. So VTA owns about 1/3 or 30% of the lot, and the city, right, owns the rest of the lot. And so that in the earlier diagram that Melissa flipped to, that kind of rectangular portion is the what we call the VTA lot. And what these diagrams are proposing is that there would be a transit-oriented development building on that, but it could also extend somewhat onto the city portion of the currently used Caltrain lot. Hopefully that helps clarify.
I think so. Today it's a lot.
Exactly. We
Yes.
refer to it as VTA lot because,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me? Yep. Right there? Okay. And thank you for the presentation. It dovetails into what this is probably gonna kill what I was going to put at the end. So I appreciate what you just said. The VTA owns 30% of this lot and the city owns 70. And I appreciate that you have to get ROI out of that El Camino property. This kind of stuck with me in the last meeting when I saw that first plan. And these two, you know, to be frank, don't ease that pain. So what we're talking about, it's a tiny building, it's set back, but it's 161 years old. And it's the oldest train station in the state in California. The pictures I was gonna show is Niles, where they are probably set back, Michael, the same, I'd say the same distance, but it's paid tribute to. So you have a plaza in front with this magnificent train station that I think is uglier than, I think this train station's much prettier. And I think this is slide 11, I believe.
Mhm.
Hugo, this is 11, isn't it?
Yes, it's 11.
Can you forward to 12? Okay, so if you look, as you're driving down El Camino, it's like you get a nanosecond if you're lucky enough to peek left to see this train station and a little grass. And to me, that's just unacceptable. I think that the central crossing design is a little better than most. If there was any way to get rid of that slice of pie building in the front, because you would, and I don't know what's to the left. I don't know what the building is to the right, but you have to open that up so people can see. You're basically hiding the view shed of this. This is the oldest building, no offense to Sean, but the building behind Sean burned down. That's a 1920s building, even though the mission was built in 76. This is the oldest building in the area, and it's got to be paid better tribute to than this, in my opinion.
May I, Dan, for 1 second? So the thing about this is it creates significant impact on the entire historic area, which goes beyond just the building itself. The whole space between the building and the part that we are not talking about, which is the historic tower, is completely hidden. The towers was built in 1924. And that is part of the historic area from the building, from the depot all the way down to the tower.
Mike, I don't think they know where the tower is.
Yeah, the tower is just to the left of Benton as you're heading towards the tracks.
There is one sketch of that in the, I did see that in one of
You
the,
can see the shadow in the building, but it's adjacent to the police station right now. And there are also two historic buildings there as well, which is actually, I believe, three, tool shed, a speeder shed, and such. And that is all part of the historic depot. So this really creates a significant impact on the historic properties, including the depot and the tower.
yeah, so just, to conclude, I know that, you guys are looking at, an ROI, right? You got a piece of property, you need to build on it. But is there other options that we can, from a design standpoint, I think, again, 11 blocks the tower, which is, to me, a non-starter, but, especially the train station, not, this plaza design. And then again, Hugo, could you go to 12? The second design.
I think Melissa's driving the slide deck.
Yeah, slide 12, sorry. Okay, so this is even worse. You know, it's basically an avenue. No one's gonna know there's a historic train station back there. And I think, you know, if we didn't have this property in the way, you could make a magnificent, you know, we're the station area task force. This is the station area. This should be paid homage to, in my opinion. I mean, it should be the centerpiece of this development, of these 290 acres, whatever, 240.
The gray area just to the left of Benton with the small box in it and the larger gray area, that's the other historic area.
Mhm.
And the historic area actually continues south of the depot as well, where the historic tracks are preserved as well.
And
And-
again, at the end, what I was going to do is show, with the limited time I had, is a couple examples of cities that in the 15 minutes I had to Google, that really made the train station the center point at Christmas, you know, celebrations, et cetera. It'd be like another downtown, another gathering destination point. This eliminates that. So, all right, thank you.
Chair, if you want Dan to share his pictures now, since it's relevant to the conversation, he can, instead of waiting till the end of the meeting.
Mm.
Want to go ahead? It would be good for the conversation if you want to show them.
Yeah.
They're pretty hinky. I did this pretty quick.
We won't judge you.
So,
We usually do.
can you see that? No. Okay, let me share again. Someone else is sharing. So I think whoever's sharing's got to give up. Share. Go. Can you, there we go. Yeah, we go full. So this is Niles. It's not on fire. That's a train right behind it. But again, you've got, I was out there 2 weeks ago and I'm sorry. It's absolutely packed. There were probably 200 people on the plaza. This is an aerial of the plaza. Oop, I'm sorry. So, I mean, something like this is, again, if the property didn't exist, the VTA and city property didn't exist, how wonderful would this be, you know, for the 240 acres, you know, as a central destination, you know, a place people could use. So it's the town, centerpiece of the town. I don't know if you guys have been there, but it's beautiful. And this is Denver's, now much bigger, obviously, but look what they do at Christmas. I mean, there's, you know, and something like that could be done in that same plaza. Even the other one, last one I could find was Sandpoint, Ohio. So again, a plaza surrounds that as well. So I put a couple up just to put a bug in your ear, but what struck me was this place here, as far as a ideal, that would be the ideal for the Santa Clara train station. And I think pay homage that 161 years it's been there. Thank you.
Dan, I think I want to add a little color if you want to go back to the Denver. In Christmas, we do have the holiday train that comes through, and we do have a stop at Santa Clara Station. And Michael, if you want to add a little color to it, I think we ran out of space where people would stand at our platform this year.
Yeah, well, we had to stop until this year, I believe. I believe Santa Clara is not on the stop list. They're going from San Francisco directly to Dearden.
Oh.
So we are working with them to try to figure that out and to see if we can be on the stop yet. But because of the EMUs and the electrification, they will not be able to decorate the outside of the train. They will be decorating the inside of the train and doing a direct from San Francisco to San Jose.
Interesting. Let's talk on the side.
Yes.
I want to talk to Ted about this.
We are working with them on that, trying to have Santa Clara still be a stop.
Okay. But
Because we do an event every year around that, around the Christmas train, the Santa train, Toys for Tots, we're open to the public, hot cocoa, all that stuff. And it's quite an event that it's typically packed. Thank you.
and I think the vision is to like, not just to have something like that happen once a year. It's to have like kind of all year long, having that space to have those kind of events like in this area as well, to kind of highlight and celebrate the area.
To that point about event types, can you give us a little bit of a picture of what you have in mind in terms of the ways in which a plaza could be activated?
Be like activation, having like more tours, historic events, having more, I would defer.
We
to
have
you.
a bluegrass band that shows up once a month and plays out on our dock, and people come just to watch that. Sometimes we have classic cars that show up and do their event there. It's limited to the depot. It's the stuff that we're involved with, but having a larger place available. The outdoor events that you could do, I don't want to take from any other place, but you could do farmers markets, you could do historic days, you could do any number of things. You could do outside concerts for people after work when they're leaving. There's any number of things that you can do with an open space like that.
Yeah, and something that does come to mind is Sunnyvale, currently at the City Line Plaza. They have a ton of events that happens pretty much every weekend. I would envision something like that.
And one last thing is Los Gatos has a park about that same size. And they've got, through the summer, weekly or twice weekly music concerts out there. So, but again, it's restricted on the square footage and, basically how big the lawn is or the plaza space.
I have a question. It might help to see the diagram on the screen here, but perhaps you could tighten the roundabout that goes around. You could tighten it on the side that is closest to the depot and move the grass to that side. Maybe that provides a little more activation right in front of the station. If that tighter circulation could work for the buses and vehicles that need to get through. Did that make sense?
Yeah, if it's okay I was actually going to pose a question to the group of whether one of the things that the examples of, for instance, the Plaza at Niles, which I visited, and absolutely, it's a great prototype. The feature is that there is, grass and plaza space right at the depot, and there isn't really much now, as you know, and this keeping the bus loop the way it is doesn't allow that. So would there be a desire to have a little bit more right in front of the depot? Because I think actually when we were doing a little bit of very early concept sketching with Ugo, he actually had a few concepts that showed what if the loop was actually rearranged a little bit. So I'm seeing some nods.
So if the loop were rearranged, the other question I have is if there is ultimately a Benton undercrossing, how does that affect the bus traffic anyways?
Yeah, I think actually Leslie pointed out, ultimately it'll be part of the transportation analysis that, we mentioned on the previous slide, but in general, the way it was sketched in the June, July, diagrams there, we'd envision we could use the bus loop as shown now. The very tricky thing would be that Benton El Camino Real intersection. It would certainly be a complicated intersection and it'd be thought out carefully, but we could most likely use the loop as it is now. But if there was a desire to, for instance, have the loop be kind of tightened and brought a little bit farther away from the depot building to allow something right in front, I would imagine that's actually possible.
We went as far as imagining the road a little bit further back towards, one of the sides to allow for a street in a plaza all the way from El Camino Real to the historic station, or a more subtle change where just the loop that is right in front of the historic station goes down a little bit to allow for more space in front of it. But those were part of our initial conversations of thinking, could this be possible? And understanding that it will require further circulation analysis.
I have a question for about the loop. So you mentioned like there's no problem from a historic standpoint that the road is not the important part. So like having a plaza on the other side more plaza around the station would be okay, or?
That would be something I'd have to refer to the historic covenant for.
Okay, yeah, it'd
I
be good
can't
to
answer
understand.
that.
Yeah, it'd be good to understand that because like, I don't think that was even considered, or we never really talked about it in previous meetings.
It hasn't been openly shown as an option.
Yeah.
But again, I can't comment directly on that without consulting the historic
Yeah,
preservation.
I just wanted to check before we redesign stuff with the loop differently and find out, oh no. There's another limit.
And I think like Melissa, if you want to bring up like that last image that we had, and I super appreciate all the work team and Hugo did. I think one of the things that you anchored is the design one visually there was the pedestrian overcrossing over there. That was originally proposed based on the original proposal of the BART station to be there. But my understanding is like currently we're reserving the space to maybe still build out that building, but that's not happening right now. And also the footprint has changed because of the parking requirements for that lot. So it may not be a visual anchor at some point, like based on the changing in design. So I just want to kind of note that.
Yes, I have a couple more questions and comments. So I know you mentioned about circulation about the 22 and 522 that you don't want to have it loop. Does it not loop already for southbound? Or are they planning to change that?
It does loop southbound and it's not ideal operationally, but we understand that on the southbound side, on the university side, there are historic or archaeological and cultural artifacts there that make it somewhat challenging to touch the frontage there. So, we understand if that's not possible, that we would continue to go into the loop in the southbound direction.
Okay, I was kind of curious if were there plans to reconfigure that too to make it a little more straight or faster. Okay. Yeah, I guess looking at what came out of this, I think the feedback or what kind of the impression I'm under is that the goal here from VTA is really maximize housing on the site. I mean, that was kind of what I felt like the proposals we were getting are really all about. I'm not sure, we're why we are trying to maximize housing in this area. Like we've within the plan, I think pushed housing more than I think any other plan in Santa Clara, especially for something that's being very community driven. Usually you don't see that. Of all the places, if we have housing everywhere else, I think really honoring the depot and trying to have a good, like a plaza and something there is probably slightly more desirable, I think, from a placemaking standpoint to me than just like yet another, like, how do we cram more housing into this one little lot? Because everywhere else we're going to have I think we've already said, like, you could go ahead, build 12-story, whatever buildings you can, right? We recognize we want that by transit. But I also recognize that VTA's sole goal usually on these places is to do TOD. I would suggest if you need a lot of housing, we consider doing that over, given the changes to the BART station. We should see what TOD we could build over there, since there's no longer a maintenance yard. I mean, there's some train parking, but all the maintenance facilities are being floor swept or cut as part of a budgeting thing. So, that might be something to consider in the future as well. So I'd like to suggest that. I mean, something I've been hoping VTA would consider, because I think that's actually kind of a waste to put trains there parked as opposed to build housing. And you get way more housing next to the BART station than you could cram on, this tiny little lot. So it just seems a little like VTA doesn't have its priorities maybe is fully aligned for what you want to do with your property. And I know BART has their own set of real requirements, but they're not getting maintenance station anyway, because you were short $1 billion, right? So just something to consider. So I guess that's my feedback. And I guess the final thing I had was, if we have some plans, what is the catalyst that VTA would see to redevelop the plaza? So why, let's say we put a plan, we have a building we want to build or a building to build. What would cause you to actually build that building? What's the process for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do have our colleague, Christina Nape, who's in transit-oriented development with us, but I'll just tee her up a little bit. She can talk more about the steps that we take in developing a transit-oriented development. But as you stated, this being a station area plan and a long-range plan, these are concepts right now, right? So these are possibilities of what can be built. What we're showing here is a mixed use development. What has also been shown on this site is office. So what we try to maintain, at least at this stage, is the flexibility to see the different kinds of possibilities there. Christina, can you just walk us briefly through what brings a site forward into our TOD portfolio to become active?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. So the first thing that we as the TOD program really look at is the market and whether or not the market will really bear a development in a certain place. And the way that we do this is we will first bring on usually a consultant, an economic analysis consultant who will do what we call market sounding. So they will go out to the developer community and say, hey, if these 3 or 4 sites were released via an RFP, would you be interested in responding to them? And if we don't get a positive response from the developer community, we're not going to release an RFP, because putting together an RFP is a lot of work on our end, and we don't want to move forward with that unless we know we're going to get proposals. We also work really closely with the city. The city dictates the land use. So what's possible there is really in terms of the density, in terms of the use and so on, is really told through the general plan and the zoning. And if, say, for example, we've done this market sounding, we found that people are interested, the city is on board and supportive, we would move forward with initial community engagement. So this is the first of, I would say, probably 9 or 10 community touch points that would take place over the course of a development. So we come out to the community and just say, hey, we're thinking of developing here. We want to put together an RFP. What are you interested in? What do you want to see in your community? What are your values? What is important to you? And we'll incorporate that into our RFP. And then we will ask the developer community to, in part respond to our TOD goals, our VTA goals, and so on, but also respond to what the community has told us. And from there, we would, hopefully receive proposals, evaluate them, choose who we think is best, recommend them to our board. And hopefully our board would agree to move forward with developer selection. And that is all of that work, I would say, is probably about a year and a half worth of work. And at the end of that, we've just brought a developer on board with a very initial concept. And that concept will continue to get refined through community engagement over the course of the entitlement process, right? So I think, like Melissa was saying earlier, this is super early days, just shaping kind of the framework and the groundwork of what would eventually become a development. But there are no decisions, being made tonight that will end in a building of a particular, size or shape or use or what have you, getting built on this site. This is really just laying the initial groundwork so that in the future, in a couple of years, if we come back, to release an RFP or we come back with a developer, we know that we've been really thoughtful about the site. We know that we've really considered it from all angles and we know what's important to folks.
So I know commercial property can be tricky right now, but
For sure.
does VTA, would you ever consider like turning that into an office building or commercial property, or VTA only purely interested in developing, I guess housing?
No, we're open to all kinds of uses. We're open to commercial, hotel, residential, and so on. Just like you said, it's a tricky time right now for commercial and retail and office. So we haven't seen as many of those projects move forward, but that's because of the realities of the market right now. I think the market, we're confident will eventually, rebound, and we will be very interested in moving forward in with a commercial or residential or mixed use project.
Okay, yeah, because I know we've talked a lot about trying to keep uses really flexible within the plan. So, if you got approached by like a developer who wanted to actually build like an office building there would be no issue with that.
Right. Not from a VTA perspective, no.
Okay, thanks.
I have another question with regards to if it were to become a plaza or a building, right now, how many parking spaces are currently on that site? And I know we're going towards TOD and trying to create that, but the museum also requires a certain amount of parking for our events that we do, for people to come see us during the week. There's still considerable amount of traffic there when there are games and people are commuting to other cities around, including San Francisco. So what is the plan to manage the parking in that area in any of these events?
Do you want me to take that? Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
why don't you start and then I might add.
Okay, great. So I can't speak to the number of parking spaces that are currently there. I will say that VTA defers to the city on any parking requirements. We don't have specific parking requirements set for our developments, but if, for example, the city says, X number of parking spaces per square feet of commercial or X number of parking spaces per unit, any development that would pursue entitlements in that jurisdiction would have to abide by all of those policies. Obviously, as a transit agency, we're trying to incentivize non-car trips, and as the congestion management agency for the county, we want to make it easier for folks to ride transit. But in terms of determining what the exact parking, ratios would be required, those are really dictated by the city.
Thank you.
I think we have two other pieces of the answer, which is just that currently there's 179 spaces on the lot. I think we have periodic counts of the present usage, and it's quite low, particularly post-pandemic. It's, I think, in the 15 to 20% usage. But recognizing you make a good point about, for instance, the train museum, the depot event usage. One thing that we had talked about kind of within the team, including Ugo, was just the idea that having a publicly owned parking lot or piece of land right at that critical space actually provides quite an opportunity versus, for instance, there being some private land just where the Starbucks, that plaza is, the hotel. You have quite an opportunity where if you have a little bit more TOD, or a way to put it is the more square footage or units and so forth that you accommodate there, you're able to actually afford, for instance, to maybe provide additional benefits. So if you have more intensity on a portion of the site, kind of along the lines of what Ugo's drawings were showing, that can actually help defray the cost, for instance, of maybe some underground parking, which could include parking for patrons of the museum, especially in non-peak times, things like that. Could also help pay for amenities on the plaza, things like that. So that's one of the trade-offs that we've been thinking about and just present there for the task forces to consideration. And it's certainly not to be resolved today, but just something to think about.
So I actually have a follow-up question for that. So I know a lot of the recent housing laws have, I think, removed parking minimums, especially when you're near something like a transit station, right? So, I certainly the benefit of, hey, you build some more housing here, and a community benefit we get is an underground parking lot that, is maybe under the entire plaza. I think that was shown, a month ago or a couple months ago as an option. Recognize underground parking is expensive and digging down there could be challenging given some historic things that might be under that parking lot as well. But would VTA, would you actually be able to require, would you expect to require parking? Because I thought, given that there's no minimums, a lot of folks would probably say, well, let's not build parking, it's $50,000 a parking spot or more, right? If it's underground. So I assume like, a development would say, hey, zero parking, right? That would be what you would do if you were maximizing, the return, right? So I guess that's my question is like, do you have that flexibility or VTA is okay putting parking in? Because I see just for patrons or people want to go and use the station, not necessarily for the people living there, because hopefully they're taking transit because they're at a transit center, right?
Yeah,
So
I
I
see
can-
Christina. Go for it.
Go ahead, sorry. So I think that, VTA does not have parking requirements. We do not say you have to have X number of parking spaces per unit or anything like that. But typically when we're partnering with developers, they are very knowledgeable of how much parking needs to be on a project to make it successful and to make sure that their property managers aren't constantly dealing with parking disputes among their residents or visitors. So, and we also see this from things like if it's affordable housing, the affordable housing funders will have a sense of like, oh, we really want to see at least, 0.2, 0.25, 0.5 parking spaces per unit. So we like to, in our program, leave the flexibility. We try not to be prescriptive and say, this is our required parking minimum, and really leave it up to developers who are the people who know best in managing their projects of what really is required to make a project successful.
I guess my question was more on the lines of,
Oh, sure.
It was proposed or mentioned like we could get extra parking for use by the community as either parking for the station for riders or whatever. How would you manage that as part of this development, right? Like, developers gonna have so much parking for its residents, right?
Right.
They're gonna pick that based on market conditions and all that. And, they'll build whatever's appropriate. Totally agree with that. But then I think the question was, could we ask for more to use as parking for the station and for the, for the museum and various other things? And so is that something that these sort of developments would, actually write in or require, or would it
Yeah,
always be whatever the developer want, whatever we need for the residents?
So it depends on the site. For example, on some of our projects, and I would need to know. I apologize. I'm not as well versed in Santa Clara as some of our other sites. But we will say, this is on a transit parking lot, and we need to maintain at least X number of transit parking stalls. And so the developer will know from day one, from the RFP, this is the amount of transit parking that will need to be maintained or rebuilt or something similar like that. That's something that we've done on several projects before, or accommodating neighboring uses, that sort of thing. So that's certainly something, when we get to the point of an RFP, we would have worked out what those requirements are and incorporate those.
Okay, thanks.
I think like on that, coming from putting on my Caltrain hat, the number of parking spots that are available on there, it's I think we have to drive like what it is, because like in the previous conversation on like what potential development over there, I had asked Caltrain staff like what is the required minimum of like the number of spots to sustain, because it really is a park and ride, because our last mile is not great in this site, on some of the riders coming particularly maybe from North Side or something like that. They do have to drive and actually park over there. Their answer is that they are thankful for VTA for giving them and be partners to give them like the number of spots that are available on there. They won't drive like the number like for themselves, because they are trying to be good partners. So like, when we come to that point where we have to set the parking minimums and stuff like that, I think like for this group and also for you guys, like on VTA side as well, we have to be advocates for those riders as well, to set those. We can't just like eliminate like the number of public parking like in that spot. So just wanted to note that.
Yeah, I do remember there were some very passionate folks who were like, oh no, I might lose my parking, and so I do assume you're doing a survey, I think you mentioned there was like 10 to 20% use, but we should just be clear. And then I know Caltrain is getting more riders now, like, because if you were doing a survey in the last 3 years, your numbers are all wrong. I mean, pandemic, right? That things are changing still.
Yeah, I can attest. I was actually looking at ridership number last night at the Caltrain meeting, and weekday riders are coming back up a lot. Weekend riders are going 110% pre-pandemic level. So a lot of people are actually coming into this space. And I can attest to, like, Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, that's where we're having the highest ridership, and it is getting difficult to find a spot in that lot.
Hey, can I make a comment on this?
Hi, Jam, go ahead.
So I just really appreciate this conversation, and I think Christina kind of said it. Flexibility, I think, is how we want to look at this, but also looking at what we're trying to do for the future mobility picture, because one of the things we're trying to do in this sort of multifunctional station area, with all these different transit types coming together, including BART, is to have all these functions integrated between the two sides. BART is going to have a parking resource over there. We should think about having the right parking resource on this side, but all those should be working together, being shared, in different time frames and so forth. So sort of getting the right number of spaces for different user types on this side, whether some of that is dedicated to the development itself for the purpose of making that development marketable, some of it dedicated to the public, some dedicated to transit, although transit riders are also going to be able to park on the other side, on the BART side, and then cross across the way. And then don't forget bicycles. If all of our multimodal strategies are working, we could have hundreds of bicycles that need to park, and we don't want those to be sort of just cluttering the plaza. We want to have those in a place that's well organized, easy to get in and out of. And so that was, an idea we had put out as, integrating within a parking facility. So I just wanted to make the point of think about this issue in the future when a lot of this mode shift has happened and we've done our job in sort of integrating the functions of the two sides of the station.
And Shim, I think you make a really good point about having the transit parking on the other side of track as well. If we think through integrating the usage between the different transit systems, that may shift what we're thinking about as well. So.
If I can say something, will you want me, Melissa, to share screen for a second?
Yeah. A few moments ago, it was raised how to perhaps increase that view shed from El Camino and also maybe soften that street that's adjacent to the historic depot. And we had noted that Hugo had played with some concepts, some more visionary concepts that transform the street network a bit that we didn't immediately show here, but Hugo is prepared to share some of those concepts as a conversation.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? No problem?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is what we were just sharing. And I know, again, thank you so much for the input. I think there's a lot of conversations here regarding scale. For instance, I'm very familiar with Denver Station. I was not familiar with Niles. It's a great case. I just went quickly on Google Earth and measured. It's a little bit smaller than this parcel. So that's something super interesting to keep in mind. But just as we were thinking about other concepts, and again, this could all become a plaza, but I think these ideas of other alternatives came from, can we move the road right in front of the station a little bit as to create a better space and relationship between the historic building and the potential plaza. So for instance, in this one, the road, whether it stays, can you see my mouse when I move it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
The original road that comes here, whether it keeps going behind the parcel along Benton Street over, or maybe it moves somewhere else, question mark. The idea is to bend this area and really create some sort of like station doorstep in this location. So this is kind of like the minimum change to that road that we were discussing. Now this whole parcel here could be a plaza. Instead of having this development here, it could be something that allows for pavilions that activate the space by providing a nice coffee shop that is next to the historic station. If that cannot be provided within the building of the historic station, maybe it can. Another option was to really rethink the road, and instead of coming down in an angle to El Camino like this, going down straight and create a plaza that directly connect the historic station all the way to El Camino. Again, think of scale. This could be pushed, this could be widened, this could be enhanced in terms of sizes. The idea is here that the road flips and changes and retracts a little bit to really provide the plaza on the side of the station. In this case, I also heard that the pedestrian bridge may be moving, and not necessarily in this location, but it was sort of like highlighting the idea of connecting directly to the historic station and the landing of the pedestrian bridge if it were to be here. Finally, the last one was like, let's move the street, make it a much smaller loop, maybe connect to the future network that we're thinking on these other parcels that were drawn in the station area plan for the larger plan, and really create. And again, this could even take over this area. It doesn't have to be this smaller space. Really imagine it takes over this whole area and create a much larger plaza. Now, true, the view shed from El Camino Real still gets sort of like more interrupted maybe, but you have a shorter loop. You take away the buses and the drop-offs of shared mobility, and it's a short walk to the station anyways, but it provides a nicer sort of like environment right in front of the building. And these were sort of like early discussions. We did know that this would require, circulation analysis and understanding of the feasibility of moving infrastructure, but were ideas that we were sort of like bringing to the table.
Thank you for sharing this. Any reactions?
So I think, thank you for these. These are actually kind of interesting ideas, like I noticed you're one of your connected plaza on the right, you have that option of like moving or a couple of these, you've moved the one building basically adjacent to Benton, so it goes under, because it's not as clear you want to have a road there anyway, right? And it almost seems like because that road, the building you could put the back of house of the building there, and no one would notice because it's on that underpass.
Correct.
And then you open up that plaza area a little more so that we can see the station. And then, yeah, that's kind of an interesting, intriguing way to like maybe maximize the building by having it kind of be long and up and down instead of east-west, so that you could still see the openings toward the the open space between the depot and the tower and everything. So I think that reconfigure it, rotating everything, I think maybe gives a little more view shed toward the thing. And that might be I do like how you've done that. And then I also agree with if your connected plaza, if that really did line up and, the traffic worked out okay, that might actually be more efficient, because you'll either get more plaza space if you do more plaza on the top, or you could build like a narrower building, or maybe shorter something, for that top. That might just give you more working space, that instead of just kind of a opened plaza in the center, right? You could connect more to the depot and have a more like depot connected plaza.
And if it extends here, it could also allow for a much larger space, more generous, in connecting to the existing underpass, also the plaza in front of the station.
I really like that idea of like having that plaza at the depot side there, and then you could put the building kind of against Benton to the side if you really are trying to put a building there. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your comment.
I think these are really interesting concepts. Like, I don't think we've ever thought of it this way before, like in this way. So there are still going to be like a lot of different considerations that we have to go through before we can like say like, this is a great idea, right? Particularly we were talking about the covenant, the historic covenant as well, on like how it affects the depot itself with like with this kind of change, because that would be pretty big. Like, I'm kind of curious, like, you know, brass tacks, like where do we go from here? Like, because like there's a lot of stuff that we're looking at tonight. There's a lot of like different concepts. Like, is there like a more of a direction you're looking for us to kind of point you to? Is this something that we want to try to figure out and incorporate into like what WRT is working on? Or is this like, I don't know where we're going with this at this point. So.
Well, what we were hopeful is that we were lifting a lot of the values and the objectives that have already been aligned in this current process. We've met with the city and WRT to express these initial ideas, just to get a sense that we're kind of staying within the rails of the station area plan. And I think, you know, our intent here is to really listen how you all are relating to some of these concepts, how we're dealing with these trade-offs, you know, opening up the plaza also may have some infrastructure impacts, or, you know, there's many things, like you said, there's the puzzle is integrated, right? And so there's a lot to consider. It's most important that we listen and hear directly from you what your concerns are. And now I'm looking to city staff because they're also on a deadline as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really good conversation, and I think this can shape what we, you know, the standards that we put on to this specific 2 properties, right? Which is our next step. Before we just had the one concept that we were really looking at. So this kind of expanded that conversation. So we can take that back with the consultant and look at it. The road alignment, the realignment is a super interesting idea that you're right, we never thought about. I don't know if it fits into our budget to study rerouting everything, but maybe we can take a cursory look at it to see, you know, would that be a difficult thing to study to see if it's possible? Because yeah, it's I do like how on the Connected Plaza one that they aligned it with that new project, which is very interesting. But yeah, we definitely take this all back. Your comments, what VT has presented, and work through it.
Mm-hmm.
So the city owns part of the parking lot already.
Yeah, about 2 acres.
What is the city's design on those 2 acres?
I don't think we have one right now. If it ends up being like we did with the downtown precise plan, we own property there as well. The city-owned property will look to develop to the precise plan. So that would be our intention. So whatever gets adopted by council for this is what the city would go to see developed.
So I'm just going to throw this out there as a crazy thing, but would there be any conversation for the city to purchase the VTA portion or trade some other property to leave the whole space open?
Yeah, that I don't know. I couldn't tell you that. I don't know. Maybe if we had a really great property to trade them with, but I don't know that we have that.
Right. Just, you know.
Yeah. It's not impossible, but.
I think we have a hand up. Afshan, I see you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to attend via Zoom. My name is Afsha Hamid. I'm the Community Development Director, and I think I've been to about 2 of the meetings now. And so first, I really appreciate the Station Area Task Force and all the work that you guys are doing. I think it's really important to have that, to have this engagement, to have your input and to have your feedback. So some things, some observations I just wanted to share tonight is I think VTA is here, and I think some of the things I heard from VTA is that they wanted the community input. They are bringing concepts forward that have opened up more opportunities for us to look at the station and the plaza and El Camino in a way that is engaging multiple aspects of the site. And I think it's really important. Some of the things that they've brought up that are important are scale. And with scale also comes programming. So Dan, I really appreciate the precedents that you've shared from Niles Canyon. I've actually been there, the Denver precedent. And then there was a third one that you shared. And I think that what all these concepts do is respect many of the ideas that you guys are bringing forward. I think this is like at a 100,000 foot level. We haven't really taken a look like, we haven't really put perspectives forward. We haven't put scale forward, like with people in there. So there's many more layers before we get to designing buildings or shaping things. I think that these are good options. So let us work with these options. We have other stakeholders that we have to engage with as well, like our internal stakeholders and possibly our planning commission and our council. So let us work with the options that have been presented and come back and see what kind of feedback we get. And let's take a look at this in a more comprehensive but still high level, and keeping all those ideas that you guys have brought forward. Let's keep all those active and engaged still.
Thank you for that. I guess like my question would be, based on what you're saying, that we want to probably work with more stakeholders to kind of work on these concepts that are before us today. For our own action on this task force, are the teams looking for kind of like a direction of what we're leaning towards at this point in time, or should we leave this a little bit more open and get more input first before we come back to this particular sticky question that we're looking at?
Yeah, I think this is a big milestone where we've gotten. And, VTA is an important partner. And I think that there's other stakeholders that we also need to engage at this point. So let us go back and work with, the other partners that we have and stakeholders, and then come back to you at some point and kind of like look at this comprehensively. There's a lot of other factors that are involved. There's a lot of other stakeholders that are involved. So let us do that.
Okay, that sounds good. And like, I do want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to VTA for working on this concept and bringing this forward, because there's a lot of things that, we hadn't considered before. And this is super interesting to us because like, it opened up a lot more opportunities for us to think through on how to do this. And we're very happy to continue a partner to be thought partners on this. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you very much. I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you.
Turn left.
So it sounds like we're at a bit of a stopping point on this. Was there anything else that we need to discuss on this item?
So we do have another presentation from WRT, but maybe we should open public comment on this topic and then WRT and then public comment again.
Yeah, I was actually having the same thought, like to see. So if If there's any attendees that would like to make a comment on this first half of the presentation, please raise your hand in the in Zoom. We don't have anybody in chamber tonight. And actually, I see half the people who are signed on as attendees are actually members. So seeing none, so I think we can move on to the next portion unless anybody needs to take a quick break, like a 5-minute. No? Okay. So why don't we move on to the WRT presentation? Jim, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So I'm Jim Stickley, principal at WRT. I think I know pretty much everyone here. And thanks VTA and Site Lab for bringing some fresh thinking to this space. Really appreciate that input. And I think it's only going to make our ultimate scheme stronger. So yeah, really appreciate that. Look forward to continuing that conversation. I'm going to be presenting with my colleague Zihan, who will be sharing her screen and the presentation. And I think our objective here, just to kind of really shift gears from the previous agenda item, is we wanted to just start giving a flavor of some of the development standards that are going to be addressed in the specific plan. And so if you go to, I guess, slide number 2, our agenda, we've sort of picked some of the key elements of the plan. And this is zooming back out now. We're looking at the entire study area. And these are some of the key elements that are really going to shape the district and will get particular focus in terms of how we're defining these elements in the standards themselves. So we wanted to just touch on a few of them. This isn't everything, but we're starting to work on the standards, and these are, as I said, some of the key ones. So we wanted to just give the task force a flavor of what shape a lot of these elements are taking, and get some input. And does this all feel like it's consistent with the plan that we've all developed to date? And then we'll keep going down this path and develop things in more detail. So we wanted to touch on street hierarchy and types. Sorry, go back to the agenda just for a second. So street hierarchy and types, mobility elements, sidewalk design, building heights, and there's some critical things to talk about here, and then green infrastructure. And I believe one of our partners from Arup should be on the Zoom, and so they'll be helping us talk about some of the green infrastructure standards. So let's go to the first one. So this should look familiar, and this sort of breaks down the street network that we've all been looking at, that serves as a framework for our plan, into these different types. So regional thoroughfares, which are essentially Coleman with its De La Cruz extension and El Camino Real. So these are sort of the big boulevard streets. Then community connectors, which we're showing as Benton, and Franklin, which is sort of a particular case in terms of a community connector. While it's not important as a vehicular connection, particularly where it goes through the university, it is an important connector from the downtown to the station area and then beyond as we bridge over into the Northern District. But a very important corridor in terms of the connectivity of the downtown to the station area. So that's community connectors. Then major internal streets are the thicker blue. And so we're starting to show things like the northern extension of Brokaw and the Champions Way, where it comes around from Coleman and comes by the BART station, and there's a pretty important function there where people are accessing the station, they're accessing the station parking, but also shuttles are stopping there, TNCs are stopping there, bicycles are using that as an access point. So that becomes pretty important, but not quite to the level of Brokaw itself. And then minor internal streets, which are most of the other streets, pedestrian paseos, which are non-vehicular sort of cut-throughs, and then the transit loop itself, which we've just been talking about a little bit, going around the station. So we want to just kind of take each one of those and talk about its function and also its experience and its character. So let's just go to the first one. So this is Coleman Avenue, and we've already talked about this a little bit and introduced this concept of sort of a boulevard, very gracious, very green, very shady, some calming to the existing configuration, but still maintaining 2 lanes in each direction, but with turn lanes. So all of these medians, both the center and the sides, would have turn lanes integrated into a portion of those as you approach intersections. So, right-hand turns on the side medians, and then left-hand turn pockets in the center median. And those are opportunities to maintain the traffic flow and movements by having those turn lanes, but also generally calm everything so that it's more bicycle friendly, more pedestrian friendly, because with the new district going in place and a lot of residential going in north of Coleman, there's going to be a lot of people crossing back and forth. So this is sort of graduating from, a high efficiency regional connector to little bit more of a neighborhood boulevard that still tries to accommodate a lot of those flows. So that's the concept here. Just a couple things to note on here. Certainly protected bike lanes, and you can see those are separated nicely from the vehicle lanes with the green planting areas. Nice wide sidewalks on both sides. On the station side, which would be the right side, you start to see some of the activation. This could be that point right at the right at the Brokaw intersection, where the corner of that mixed use might have some activated uses as you turn down Brokaw to the right. So you can start to see that in the section here. So that's Coleman. Let's keep going. Brokaw. So much different street, different character. This one has sort of 2 modes, if you will. The first one shows what we're calling flex zones, which those are those 8.5-foot spaces to either side of the travel lanes, and they accommodate a number of different things. They accommodate TNC, pickup and drop off. They accommodate bike share clusters. They accommodate service and delivery functions, and they accommodate public parking, where there's space for that. So it's sort of a new way of thinking about what has traditionally been known as the parking lane. And it really accommodates a number of different uses, and flexibility, again, is going to be the name of the game there. And then those are used to separate the bike lanes from the travel lanes. So you can see the bike lanes on the inside, and then a nice wide sidewalk on the right, which is against the Gateway Commons project. They have not that much activated retail along Brokaw for Gateway Commons. However, on the other side, where we're showing redevelopment, potential redevelopment parcels on the left side, that's one of our main places to put activated ground floor uses. So really trying to get very wide sidewalks there where you can sort of have a dining strip with outdoor retail displays and dining, nice wide sidewalk, a tree strip, which is paved with tree grates. So that adds to the functional usage of the sidewalk. So you add all that together, it's about 20 feet. So really nice and wide, accommodating lots of activities with, a good amount of pedestrian flows. So that's Brokaw. And then the other mode, I think, yeah, we're also showing is where there's a bus stop. And here the space that had been used for those flex zones is now utilized to get a bus pull-off and a really nice sized transit shelter. So the idea is that these transit shelters are really attractive, really comfortable. They're kind of civic places where it's really comfortable to sit and wait for your bus in the shade. There's digital displays, and there's plenty of room for that in this transit shelter island. And so those are an important function, especially as you get close to the BART station, because the opening of the Benton-Brokaw corridor, either over the tracks or under the tracks, as we've been showing it, will present an opportunity for some bus routes to take advantage of that. And having stops right near the BART station on that side could really enhance, a transition point from bus to BART. And then I think in the next view, we show a little plan view of how these two modes are coming together. So do you want to actually just flip to that little plan view, Zihan, where we're showing?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, there you go. So here you can see, if you see Champions Way, this is sort of flipped sideways 90 degrees, right? But Champions Way, you can see the BART Plaza entry would be on the left side, there on the corner. And then on the right side is Gateway Commons. And so you can see we've got a bus stop right there near the BART. And then that takes up that space, which then as you go further north, which is to the right on this diagram, then you recapture that flex zone for use in, parking, bike share, ride share, drop-off zones, etc. And then you get past this first little intersection of one of our side streets as you continue to the right, and then there's another bus stop coming the other way. And then you can see the street reconfigures. So reconfigures, it's also, kind of weaving back and forth a little bit, and that's having a calming effect on the traffic. The bike lanes are still pretty much a clear shot, but they're very safe, very protected. So this is the kind of detail that we'll be getting into in the standards as we define each of these street types. And then, yeah, very quickly going back. So this is one of the internal streets. We're trying to be narrow here. We're trying to have this be a pedestrian-oriented environment, to have some human scale, but still spacious travel lanes in each direction, parking on one side, a decent sized sidewalk and tree strip, which again could be a paved tree strip or non-paved, but generally with more density, you want that paved because you're trying to accommodate more pedestrian flows. And then the bikes we think can be handled with sharrows just fine on these side streets. They're, much less traveled, and sort of mixing bikes and cars here is a way to keep things calm. And we think you don't really need the dedicated bike lanes in a street like this. And just continuing on, and then the pedestrian paseos. So these are non-vehicular, and they're just pedestrian cut throughs for bikes and pedestrians. Sometimes you might have a little activated place on the alley where you might have a little, a little cafe or a pub there that has its frontage on the alley. So this is what that's starting to show. And then next slide. And we went through that. And then, yeah, this is just a 3D view of the Brokaw corridor. And this is, again, this is the level that we want to start getting into in the development standards, showing how the activated building frontages relate to the street, the dining and retail display zone, the circulation zone, places for some amenities like benches and maybe private bike parking, and then the bike lane itself separated by the flex zone, a bike share station incorporated into the flex zone, and then the travel lane. And you can see the dimensions here. So these are the kind of detail that we'll get into in the space allocated for each one of these zones. That would be part of the standards. And next slide. So we can just take a pause there. Actually, how do you want to do this, Chair? Would you like us to get through the whole thing and then take comments, or should we take a break in each element category?
Let's go through the presentation and then we'll come back to the sections like we did the last few times.
Okay,
So
cool.
we'll be sure we have enough time to get through the presentation first.
Okay, sounds good. So the height diagram. So this is something we need to talk about, because the comment that we received last time is that we don't want to restrict someone's ability to build a tower that takes full advantage of the airport maximums, right? And yet we don't necessarily want towers everywhere. So if you, do we have the 3D view after this, Zihan?
Yeah, we do have with what we want to share. I can quickly
Yeah. Yeah, so just as a reminder, in our massing, we're showing the towers sort of along Brokaw. They're, strategically placed in the areas, let's say, closer to the station, emphasizing the Brokaw a little bit as you go to, to the left of Brokaw on the main green, but they're not everywhere. And it's sort of recognizing that mid-rise is going to be the most likely and feasible building type that the market will support. But occasionally there would be someone that wants to build a tower. And in fact, that has happened in Gateway Commons. And you can see where in the massing there that it's all mid-rise except there is one tower. And so that spirit, I think, is what we want to try to capture in the height allowances. But a tower could also occur in that whole zone north of Coleman. And it might be that a developer comes in and they want to do that. And yeah, it could be there on the corner, but it could even be further to the left, in some of those blocks. And I think what we want to do in the height allowances is to allow flexibility, so that if there is someone that wants to build a tower and it's a little bit different from our vision of clustering it around the station and around Brokaw, that there should be some flexibility, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think that was the spirit of some of your comments last time. So I think what we'd like to figure out here is, how do we have a heights allowance diagram that allows the full potential of the airport height limitations, but how do we also put a cap on the number of buildings, or let's say the amount of of FAR that is actually in tower configuration. And so that's a little puzzle, I think, that we need to figure out. And I think that, one way would be that the height allowance diagram, except for the step backs, which we want to be pretty deliberate about, especially along Brokaw, where we really want to honor the scale of Gateway Commons and keep Brokaw as, a human scaled street. So I think having a step back, which captures the mid-rise height, but then allows the full tower heights beyond that, and perhaps even allows the full tower heights elsewhere, in all of these orange zones. But then, as I said before, have a mechanism where we cap. So if you get a certain number of towers, you've sort of reached what we think is the right limit, that it's capped and no additional ones could be built. So that's sort of the discussion I wanted to get some input on this evening. So let's keep skipping forward and then we can come back to that. I know that was kind of a big question. But let's first go to the green infrastructure. We've got Eunice from Arup that's joined us. Welcome, Eunice. And why don't we kind of switch over to your deck?
Just pull this up for sharing. Okay. Oh. Wait, oh, sorry, wrong screen. Okay. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Oh, okay, brilliant. So
We can see it now.
okay, awesome.
You just need to make it full screen.
Okay, cool. It's not letting me do full screen unless I'm in Teams for some reason. Okay, all right, there we go. All right, so thank you everyone on the task force, and we're gonna really quickly go through the green infrastructure plan just to be aware of time. So just as a brief run through our process, when looking at the green infrastructure plan, the main design guideline we're following here is SCROVRP, which is the Santa Clara Valley Urban Runoff Pollution Prevention Program. For context, this is one of the oldest stormwater management guidelines in the Bay Area. It has been tried and tested across a variety of cities in the South Bay. So rest assured, this is one of the most trustworthy standards we can follow, and fortunately, it also relates directly to the AHJ in this case. And when looking through SCROVRP, our goal was to develop a green infrastructure option menu based on all suggested green infrastructure mitigation strategies for stormwater, and then based on the site conditions, selecting what was most appropriate that could be used in the plan for the entire development. And then within the development, we considered which strategies would be most appropriate, which were placed broadly on the conceptual plan. But each decision is based on a variety of factors for each site. So we will consider individual sites that reflect typical land use typology, which will allow us to consider what are the trade-offs here and what makes the most sense for our design philosophy. So when looking at the menu options and considering the various green infrastructure elements, it's important to keep in mind when we look at bioretention area, tree well filter, and green roofs and flow-through planter boxes, we're effectively dealing with a very similar technology, which is plants paired with soil that allows for greater detention of stormwater whilst providing co-benefits of additional vegetation and greenery to a space. This also increases the capacity of existing stormwater drainage because it slows down that stormwater before it gets to the physical infrastructure like the pipes. On the flip side, when you're considering things like pervious pavement or rainwater harvesting, you have solutions that don't necessarily utilize the same examples of vegetation, but can provide other co-benefits. Pervious pavement, for example, being able to contribute to the aesthetic properties of neighborhoods, and rainwater harvesting providing opportunities for reuse, which is very useful for lowering water demand for a site and saving money on the water bill. Those are just the definitions of these technologies based on the guidelines provided for reference. So when looking at the site as a whole, where we place stormwater infrastructure is going to be determined by where flooding is going to be our biggest risk, because the name of the game for this type of mitigation is to ensure that we have enough detention, particularly in areas where water tends to pool. And if we look across this site, you can see pooling occur around parcel 3 and 11 in particular, which did inform a lot of our thought process. And in addition to the flooding, a additional thing to keep in mind, which we talked extensively with our colleagues at WRT about, is where the most foot traffic is going to be. And obviously that's that area surrounding parcel 10 along streets like El Camino Real and Brokaw. And when we're looking at the mitigation strategies we're placing there, we also want to showcase the forward thinkingness of VTA and the city of Santa Clara. So we are sure that we place those very innovative solutions in those areas where everyone can see, appreciate, and benefit from them. Oh, and as a reference for the flooding comes from the Storm Drainage Master Plan from 2015. So with this in mind, when we look at the proposed green infrastructure plan as a whole, there's a big focus on having bioretention and green roofs, specifically in the residential areas up here, because that's where we had a lot of our flooding focused. And then for areas near the station, we focus a lot of our more innovative but slightly more expensive procedures, which would be things like permeable pavers, which is outlined in the purple, as well as rainwater harvesting roofs, which are outlined in the pink. Those roofs as well are selected near areas of green space, just because that will provide a natural reuse option that doesn't require any treatment. Rainwater harvesting can actually be used for toilet flushing as well. However, that's going to be on a case-by-case basis with the building, but we did select larger buildings just as a rule of thumb because we anticipate them having greater occupancy, which can justify an economy of scale for rainwater treatment, which will allow for those type of uses. And additionally, just when considering our bioretention measures, the default is impermeable lining for these areas because the groundwater table is roughly 5 to 10 feet below the surface, depending on where you are on this site. However, there will need to be additional site-specific investigation to confirm, because there is benefit to having infiltration, which is if you can infiltrate into the aquifer, you don't even need to discharge that water into your storm system in the first place, which allows for even greater capacity in addition to the capacity your stormwater infrastructure, which holds this water, is able to provide. Now, when it comes to looking at each individual typology and thinking of the trade-offs, it's going to depend on how the land is used. So for a typical street section, and in this case, the view is inspired by El Camino Real, you have a lot of asphalt, but you also have a lot of pedestrians which are walking on nearby streets. So the focus here, at least from the green infrastructure standpoint, is obviously the stormwater, but also how can we make the pedestrian experience most enjoyable? And that's going to be looking at solutions that are going to do the best to also mitigate the urban heat island effect. So as you can see, tree wells are highly recommended because they're able to provide the co-benefit of shade, as well as bioretention and planter boxes, just because of more vegetation has more greenery, which can reduce the heat coming off the asphalt. When deciding between these three, because as I mentioned earlier, they are quite similar in nature, the biggest trade-off is between cost and footprint. So tree wells have the smallest footprint, but also have a larger cost. Meanwhile, bioretention has a much larger footprint, but also has a much smaller costs. So that is the primary trade-off between these three solutions here. And then finally, when we're considering buildings on both sides of the road, there is another trade-off to consider, which is one when picking between doing a green roof solution or rainwater harvesting. Green roofs require much less maintenance and do reduce the urban heat island effect. But once again, if there is an occupancy with great density, rainwater harvesting could be in the picture. So we're not ruling it out completely yet, but there definitely is a preference towards the former when considering these type of layouts. Now, similarly for mixed use developments, there is a focus on aesthetics because we also will get a lot of foot traffic, much like roads, but instead of having commuters passing by, the goal is to get them to stay and be able to play and enjoy the space. So with that in mind, when we're focusing on more aesthetic goals, pervious pavement is a great solution because not only does it provide detention in the pores of the individual blocks that make up the walking space, but it also provides to the aesthetic properties of a neighborhood. Similarly, we also propose tree wells and flow-through planters because this is mixed use space, and often this is space where commerce is happening. There is not as much space to size bioretention areas. So the goal here for our green infrastructure is to be able to fit in compact areas and not take up too much footprint. And then going back to the conversation we were having previously about rainwater harvesting versus green roofs, in this case, you do have the same weighing of pros and cons. However, in this case, because we are looking at mixed use developments with higher densities, it's more likely to realize the benefits of rainwater harvesting for those applications because you'll have a higher water demand in areas like this. Now, for the third most common type of land use, residential, we have a little bit more area to play with. So, and if you remember from our previous slide, which had the flood maps, parcels 1 and 3, which were completely residential developments, had also the highest risk of flooding. So accordingly, bioretention is the preferred intervention in those areas because it will provide the largest footprint. So it will be able to hold the largest amount of stormwater volume when addressing this, as well as providing a nice garden and vegetation for aesthetic properties of the neighborhood, which is the same idea behind having pervious pavement as well. But if there are narrower areas, like in pedestrian walkways between homes, flow-through planters and tree wells, as we've discussed, are always the way to go. And then because this is also residential, green roofs are preferred here as well because we don't anticipate to have as high of a density and water demand as with mixed use developments. However, so in this case, the green roofs can also be considered because the insulation they're able to provide during the summer to reduce heating costs. And then for our last consideration, we're looking at parks and open spaces, particularly the green area in the middle of parcel 6. So we have the usual suspects, tree wells and pervious pavement. But what we want to talk about here is our considerations for determining whether we go with a typical bioretention garden or we consider adding detention in a park space. So with bioretention, obviously you do have good volume control with this solution because you do have the soil and the vegetation. However, in places like New York, they've been able to maximize their surface detention by incorporating that type of design with sports fields. So with this basketball court example, which they've done in parks in Brooklyn, they present a depressed basketball court, which is able to function as a sink during stormwater events, while also providing functional bleachers and stairs for spectators to enjoy and use the park space. The only downside being that this area is meant to flood, so there is a detriment in terms of usability after major storm events. In that case, to maximize the above space, you can have below surface detention, which is very common for baseball and soccer fields, where you have tanks stored below the field space that can physically hold the water during large stormwater events. This is obviously the most expensive solution compared to above surface detention and bioretention. However, it does provide year-round and weather event around access to these type of spaces. So it is up to the needs of the community and will need to be workshopped with those ideas in mind. And that's everything we have for green infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks, Eunice. Hey, quick question I meant to ask you before, but when we're looking at co-benefits and starting to think about energy as well as the green infrastructure, can one combine solar with rainwater harvesting on roofs? Are those two compatible?
Yes, because with solar, the rain should slide off the photovoltaic cells and go into the gutters anyways. And then the rainwater harvesting is connected to the gutters.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Okay, great. So that is what we wanted to present, just in terms of an overview of some of the detail we're getting into for our development standards. And we can take questions and have discussion in any of these three areas. So streets, building heights, and green infrastructure. And we can go back to any parts of those presentations that folks want to.
Yeah, let's open it up. Anybody have some immediate reactions or any particular part you want to have Jim flash up and discuss?
I'll go. I took some notes as we went. One presentation comment, I noticed on the street hierarchy, you somehow deleted Alameda. I don't know if that was intentional or.
No, not intentional.
Okay.
That sounds like an error. So we'll make sure Alameda is in there.
Yeah, next to the Benton, it's the one that goes north-south there. It's
Yeah.
chopped, and so you have kind of two dead-end streets. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about the towers, and I think that's a really interesting concept of like, can we allow a bunch of towers and then maybe there's a count, like the first N that get built will allow it, and then you stop. So whoever wants to build them first gets the towers, and whoever comes later maybe doesn't. I think that was an interesting concept. Is that something that you can generally do with the zoning code, or is that allowed? I mean, because I like that idea, because then you don't just end up with like a wall of of buildings, but you also give people that chance to really build density. Because I actually kind of appreciate Tasman East actually built the tower. I mean, I think it's a senior home, but it's kind of cool that there's, a couple tall buildings. I think that one actually looks pretty good and works out well. So, so I just say, hey, maybe there's a way to do that. I do also agree with your comments about step backs. It would be good to make sure that, when you do build a tower, it's not a wall, that it does have a good balance. And then I had a question about the environment thing. There's talk about rainwater retention. And I was a little curious about like how much water storage do you need? Because like there's a the comment was like, it only makes sense to do when you have denser uses. And I was actually surprised about that because I'm surprised about how much rain would fall, especially here where it's dry most of the year. And like, would you actually have enough to actually do things like flush toilets with it? And then how much space do you end up losing for water retention? Because you're saving it on site versus like some of these permeable things, right? Where things kind of flow into the environment and then go away. Like, do we lose useful area for other parts of the building?
Yeah, that's a great. Oh, wait, should I respond to that question directly, or Jim, did you want to?
Yeah, go ahead, Eunice.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that is an excellent question about rainwater harvesting. So you are right, there is a trade-off on what roof space we can use, because obviously if you had a rainwater harvesting system, you can't use a green roof and vice versa because that space is already taken up. In terms of the typical profile for Santa Clara and the Bay Area in general for using rainwater harvesting, we have used rainwater harvesting systems in places in Palo Alto before, and those have resulted in some noticeable savings, like around 10%, but that also was using very large stormwater, rainwater tanks. So there is also the consideration of the tank storage on the ground, at least in terms of the imaginable use for rainwater harvesting for this site. It's going to depend on how dense we can make these buildings and how large they are, because we can make the storage large enough to hold for a few weeks, if not a few months, and that can hold the water for other days to make the economic case for that. But it will need to do further analysis when we get into the design phase to make those decisions. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess that helps me understand a little bit more about that. Thanks. Oh, actually, one other question. You mentioned like we have a trade-off with the green roofs versus not. So like a green roof that retains about the same amount of water on site as these rainwater retention strategies.
When you say rainwater retention strategies, do you mean rainwater harvesting or like bioretention?
Harvesting, yeah. I guess there's the other ones too, but yeah. The rainwater harvesting, I guess it's the same amount of water used for both cases, or staying on the building, or is there a different trade-off there?
Yeah, so rainwater harvesting will actually reduce the stormwater going to the drain by more because we're collecting all the rainwater that goes off the gutters. Meanwhile, green roofs, yes, there is grass and soil on that roof and it is providing capacity and volume to hold, but that soil can only hold so much before the water starts percolating through, and that will then need to be connected to a gutter and then go through the typical stormwater drains and contribute. So rainwater harvesting does actually provide more capacity depending on the storage, but generally with the expected storage we would use for this development, it would.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I had one. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Dan.
So I wanted to go to the Benton, the flex zones. What was the width on that again?
8.5 feet on Brokaw, you mean?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, 8.5 feet. So it's like a nice width park, on-street parking space.
Because I mean, one thing, and this is something we're in conversation with, just real preliminary, but I spoke with Glideway, or Glideways, I believe they're called, and their footprint's about 5 to 5.5 feet. So if the tunnel went through, that's the company that's being used for the Dearden airport connection. And so it's a very small form factor. Is the flex zone on Brokaw on both sides?
Yes, it's on both sides where there's not a bus stop, but it would also disappear when you go under the, when you go into the tunnel, right? That would be extravagant to try to, well, plus you wouldn't need it down there, right? Because those flex zones are for uses that that support adjacent land uses. So we haven't studied that yet, but we need to. It needs to be part of the standards. What is the cross section that is desired actually going through the tunnel? And that's going to be just circulation, right? That accommodates the flows, but not any of the other amenities. So it can be narrower and more efficient.
And forgive me, the flex zones were on Benton or Brokaw?
They're on Brokaw. Well, the
Not-
ones we're showing are on Brokaw. We haven't looked at Benton specifically because that's already been improved as part of a couple of the other more recent projects. So we've focused mainly on Brokaw on the the north side.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, before you leave this particular slide that you have up here, I had some thoughts on this. I guess a couple things that I heard discussed around this typology sound reasonable. However, I think there's some terminology that's getting a little bit confusing for me with between Brokaw and Champions Way in particular. For one thing, I feel like what we're looking at is future Brokaw or Brokaw Street extension, but I'm not sure. In any case, that's kind of a minor refinement. When you were mentioning Champions Way and Brokaw, and you were alluding to the entrance to the future BART station being off of Champions Way, I sort of scratched my head and then I looked at a map to just see if I could get on the same page as you all. And what it seems to me is that Champions Way sort of does have a name change. I mean, it's a weird thing, but Champions Way sort of becomes another street that's called, I don't know if I can get to it right now, Wando Way.
Yeah, Wando. That's correct. Where it joins Coleman.
Yeah. In other words, Champions Way is a street that sort of takes a complete right angle, which is a very unusual thing.
It
However-
actually, it continues in loops. It's not built yet.
Sorry?
So the new BART station, when that's put in, Champions Way comes down and loops around
Yeah.
next to the BART station. So the east-west street directly bordering the station is Champions Way.
Okay, that's fine.
It's not on the current maps if you're looking at that. Yeah.
I think what was confusing was that there was sort of what Jim showed was an intersection of Brokaw at Champions Way,
Which will be the corner of the BART station.
which is, again, that's a future.
It's a future thing. Yeah.
Correct.
a
Correct.
future condition.
Yeah.
What I really want to make a comment about is that on Brokaw Road extension, let's call it, I think this group has supported the notion of exploring BRT. And I wonder if your team could prepare a typology that could accommodate such a concept. Of note, in the street typology diagram for Brokaw, I saw cars, but I didn't see any buses. And I think just for sort of messaging for this project, it would be nice if we could incorporate images of buses mixed with cars. I mean, this area is supposed to be transformative. And so the notion of just looking at
the same cars in the future, 40 years from now, that we've been looking at for eons, doesn't feel that transformative to me. And we're looking at green infrastructure, which is very transformative. So why don't we, take that over to the mobility side?
Yeah, totally agree. So, yeah, there were two modes of Brokaw. So this was the one that shows how the bus is integrated into that cross section. And then the plan view shows how, how we go from bus stop cross section back to the section with the flex zones on either side. So yeah, definitely thinking of Brokaw Street as a multimodal transit, bike, pedestrian and vehicle street here in this northern section. The notion of BRT kind of changes the picture quite a lot, because then you're definitely into dedicated lanes that could have, center boarding islands and things like that. So I guess if we're going to go there, we would just need to know a little bit more about what VTA's goal is in terms of how BRT fits into the broader transit system. Where is it going to? Where is it coming from? Which corridor does it impact? And then, then we can certainly take a look at that.
Yeah, I'm really glad that Robert's here on this particular night to sort of chime in if he wants to. But I want to just also add that the reason that I'm sort of picking on Brokaw Extension is because if one could take the opportunity to do a BRT treatment of some kind on there, even if it meant that it was not going to be open to cars, at least we wouldn't be taking something away from what is out there now. And as we all know, we like to think about transformative transit-oriented communities as one where, transit is really, first, perhaps. I mean, I think that's the direction that a lot of folks want to go with transit-oriented communities. And we always know that there's so much tension with being able to accomplish that, where we also have a community that has a lot of pro-car ideas. And so if we could at least think about doing it in an area where this doesn't exist today. So this might be a candidate to open up some thinking, but, I completely defer to VTA to, hear from them about what they think around BRT, and is it something they'd like to see? That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the spirit of let's be future minded, let's be transformative. So really appreciate those sentiments.
I was just thank you, Jim, and thank you so much, Member Huff. Just briefly, maybe to talk about the Brokaw Benton connection and just what role it could serve in terms of transit and enhanced transit. We have discussed internally, when we've been looking at the June-July preferred alternative diagrams and so forth. And I think what we'd say is if that connection, if whether it's under or over the tracks can be made, that would be a great benefit to the VTA Route 60, the one that I mentioned before, and we actually do view the VTA Route 60 as one that has one of the most the greatest promise among some of our bus routes for ridership growth, because it connects so many key destinations: Milpitas BART, the airport, this station area, and then down to Valley Fair, Santana Row. And I think it actually goes down to perhaps Winchester Light Rail at the other end, but it's a lot of key destinations, and it could be an enhanced connection much better than what it does right now, which is go on that kind of flyover thing from Coleman to El Camino Real. Very indirect. It has to at one point literally kind of loop on itself to get back on track, the Route 60. As to whether or not BRT proper, with dedicated lanes and such would make sense, it's probably more almost an exercise for WRT working with you to determine, does that seem to fit in the space available? In general, VTA is always supportive of things to prioritize transit, speed and efficiency. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Can somebody fill me in about what WRT stands for, please?
Sure, I can. Wallace, Robertson, Todd those were the three of the founders of the company, but our name has been more recently shortened to WRT Design, and we're planning urban design, architecture, and landscape architecture firm.
Thank you.
Can I ask one, Bob? Are you evaluating, oh, can't hear me? That's a first. Loud. Because I have read some things that you're evaluating with people like Glideways, folks like that. How, can you go into like a couple minutes on that, or is that down the road? Yeah, that's to you.
I am aware just generally of VTA working on that. I think it's actually in partnership with the city of San Jose,
right?
In terms of kind of the airport people mover concept, but I'm not the expert on it, so I wouldn't want to, go too far afield. Happy to, though, offline if you wanted to.
Sure.
Yeah, you can perhaps through Leslie or Rebecca, they have my contact information. Happy to, connect you with the right person.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciated Jill's comments about like, can we take advantage of making stuff more transit and pedestrian oriented, as opposed to just putting cars through there. Like the idea of like making that Broca connection, bus, transit, bike, maybe only first, I think actually is a pretty cool idea because it makes it maybe more inviting to actually go use it for walking and stuff and things like that. So I'm not sure it's absolutely necessary to put cars in there because I bet you it's just a bunch of people going to Costco and that'll just get backed up. So I think that's a really good idea, but I guess it's also costly. So, I don't know if we'd, as much as I'd love to see it, I also don't know if we usually have the stomach to spend that amount of money for something that's just transit, but maybe we should so I think that's a really good idea she had. So.
Jim, what else have we not commented on that you need us to talk about?
Jim, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. No, these are good comments on the street cross sections. There was one helpful comment on the building heights. It would be good to hear if there are any other comments on that. And then, yeah, anything else on green infrastructure? I know we had a couple of questions on that. But yeah, particularly on the building heights, it would be nice just to hear if there are any other sentiments there.
Defer to the task force before I give my spiel. Go for it.
Thanks, Jim. I have no problem with building towers, but I agree that you shouldn't build all towers. So it's some kind of cap that limits the amount of them. Otherwise, we'll just end up in a jungle of concrete. So whatever's the smartest way to do that. I don't know if it's just first people in the door or you limit it to 4 or 5 towers throughout the whole project over 10 stories, some kind of guideline that limits them all from being towers, but also creates the opportunity for at least a couple to be those kind of trophy assets would be nice.
Yeah, that's helpful. And, it could be that we prioritize zones, so like the area around the station where we're showing the sort of the office preference. It's not going to be restricted to office. Those could be residential, but we've always said that that's the best place for commercial office. Maybe that's a priority zone. Maybe the Brokaw corridor is a priority zone. And maybe there's a way to encourage or incentivize more towers there without completely prohibiting them elsewhere. And then, as you say, sort of set a limit somehow or a cap.
Yeah, I'll have to think about what's the smartest way to put that guideline into place, but I think I agree with your sentiment.
I think like along that line is, I wouldn't want like a bunch of towers clustered together because that would create a bit of a wall. So like the way that I was looking at it is like, I don't really want a monolith of a tower like by itself. There needs to be like some sort of step down. But like, I have no problem with a tower as a concept, like in general, but like it does need to have a bit of perspective. So like when I'm looking at like Tasman, like the new towers that just opened over there, those are pretty tall, but like there is a step down, like to kind of ease into more of a human scale towards the pedestrian way, right of ways, right? So it's not like you're just looking straight up a wall as you're looking at those. So, but yeah, the kind of
Yeah,
capping the number of tower makes sense to me too.
I like the comment on the not having them all bunched together too much, because then they create this, this big barrier. So maybe there's also a separation standard where towers need to have, a minimum amount of separation from the next one.
Any other thoughts about the building heights? I think there was also a comment about like the FAA standards, like the maximum and stuff like that. I think we have less of a problem with reaching that height when it's closer to the airport in that way. But like, I know we have that zone as more of like light industrial still, like, so that would be like about 4 stories and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Open to more, if there aren't any, we can keep going.
I had one question for ETA. So many years ago, by the way, I'm on the station CWG. I had asked about, I think 60 or BART or buses stopping at the BART station, because I was surprised the station wasn't actually incorporating any actual transit stops. There were no plans for any transit to actually go to the station. It was all stop on the Santa Clara side, and I guess you walk through a tunnel or whatever. At least that was the plan. So are those plans then potentially changing if we were to have a connection
My understanding is that it's possible that they could change, but some of it would really depend on actually the possibility of a Brokaw Benton connection, because right now it is very circuitous, to get in and around from the west side or southwest side to the northeast side of the BART and Caltrain corridor. So that would really open up a possibility, for instance, for the 60 to go through, but then maybe for there to be something that actually serves the plaza area that we were talking about, and also the BART station on the other side. I think you're absolutely right, though, especially based on what you heard last month from our colleagues, that some of the value engineering that's happening about the station and the parking lot is kind of, leading to some good discussions about opportunities. So stay tuned, I think.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because when I first heard about the San Jose Airport connector, I was like, hey, we already have a station that like goes to the airport. You just go on the other side. It's that flyover that's what kills you, right? So Brokaw might even make the San Jose thing a little obsolete.
I add a little bit of color on the connection on Brokaw as well. As a part of Caltrain right away, we would never open back up the over because of grade separation. So it will have to go under. Yeah.
So these are all health plans, both on the streets, and the heights and also on the green infrastructure. So I think for us, we're just going to keep pushing forward. We need to give definition to this whole plan. So we'll just continue as we are, incorporating some of the feedback that we've gotten. We've got, a new little puzzle to solve with the station plaza. So we'll definitely figure out with Leslie and Rebecca how we want to interface with VTA and their team so that we can land on something that can be reflected in the plan. So stay tuned on that as well.
And we do need to open public hearing.
Becca read my mind. So I like to open to public comment at this point, since it looks like we're kind of calmed down on our discussion. So if there's any members of the public who would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand. In Zoom, we don't have anybody in chamber today. Seeing none, I think we can move on. So I think that's the end of this item, correct? All right. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations. It's been really good discussion. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
thank you. Cool. So we'll move on to the next item. It is just part of our business. We are lacking a vice chair right now, so we need to go into election of a task force vice chair.
Yes, so the position was previously filled by member Ganesh, but since he's no longer on the task force, we do need to fill the position. The vice chair only really acts in the chair's absence. So you would take over duties should you ever need to recuse, which I don't think would happen, or if you're absent, essentially.
Thank you. Procedure wise, are we doing the kind of nomination and then acceptance and then vote?
Yes, so if anyone has any nominations, we'll start with that. The nominee would need to accept, and then we'll do a vote, depending on how many nominees we get.
Cool. We are open for nominations. No, don't ever, not everybody jump in at once.
I'll nominate someone.
Go for it.
Member Evans.
I will not accept because it's likely that I will not be around at the same time as the chair.
Fair enough. That was a compliment to you.
I appreciate it. I would nominate member Plain if you would be interested in being vice chair.
I will accept.
Thank you.
Do I second that?
I'll accept the nomination, but we'll put it to the vote. Any other nominations for vice chair? If not, I'm going to put it to a vote for confirmation. Okay. Do we also need a motion and a second before we do the vote?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to do a roll call vote. Those who are in favor of accepting Member Plain as vice chair, when I come to you, say aye. If not, say no. So I'm going to start with Member Guard.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Collins.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Evans.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Scher.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Hall.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Nguyen.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Ondrasek.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Plain.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Stockwell.
Aye.
And then aye for me, unanimous, one absence. Congratulations, new Mr. Vice Chair. Great. Thank you. And then if I'm ever absent or have to recuse, staff can walk you through, and we always have a script to go through, so it's pretty easy. Cool. I think that's all the items we have for regular business. So the next section we have is public presentations and comments. Is there anyone that would like to address the task force on items that are not on the agenda tonight? This goes for members and also members of the public, members of the task force and the members of the public. So if there's anything, speak now. If not, we can move on. Cool. And then the next item is staff report.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide an update on the schedule, if anyone was following along with the email I sent out a couple months ago now. So in consultation with WRT, we are going to hold the September meeting and skip the October meeting. And during the month of October, they'll be working on actually drafting the plan, so that we pushed that a month. So let me look at the calendar. We will be meeting on September 18th. We will not be meeting as of right now on October 16th.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Are there any other announcements or other items from the members and staff outside of the schedule report? No? And we have come to the end of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting to the next regular scheduled meetings of September 18th?
Move that we adjourn until September 18th.
Thank you, Member Hein, for your motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Everybody seconds. Those who are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And we're adjourned at 8:45. Thank you, everyone, for your discussion tonight.